Think about a solid bar of gold just sitting on your kitchen table right now.
Okay, yeah.
You know intuitively exactly what that means, right? It's heavy, it's undeniable. The atoms physically belong to you.
Right, you can literally feel the value.
Exactly. And I mean, if you lose the paper receipt from the dealer who sold it to you, it really doesn't matter.
No, not
You
really
still
that.
pick up the gold, put it in a safe or just bury it in your backyard. The physical object is the asset.
Yes.
This is Echoes of Insight from Ecoscopia. A man who cannot read his own body is a man being managed. A man who cannot read market cycles is a man being moved by forces he will never see coming. A man who has never voluntarily walked into discomfort is a man whose courage is theoretical. These three failures are not separate. They are the same failure. The failure to become your own infrastructure. Blood, coin, forge. This is the correction. Every dive takes a subject you've only met in fragments and holds it under light until the structure shows. Today, cold storage, the Coldcard, and the real weight of self-custody.
Just bury it in your backyard. The physical object is the asset.
Yes, that physical intuition is deeply ingrained in us.
But when you step into the architecture of decentralized digital wealth, that same physical intuition, the one humanity has relied on for thousands of years, it completely betrays us.
It's a total inversion of how we're wired to think.
It really is. We entered this system where the physical device you hold in your hand is essentially worthless, and the receipt, like a string of 24 seemingly random English words, is the actual asset.
Yeah, the words of the wealth.
Right. And if that piece of paper burns, the wealth vaporizes. It doesn't just become hard to access. It ceases to belong to you forever.
It's this massive mental flip. I mean, we just aren't wired to think like that. Our entire evolutionary history tells us to protect tangible things,
Right. We want to build walls around the heavy stuff.
Exactly. We want to lock up the heavy metal safe, our electronics, things we can actually touch. But the architecture of a system like Bitcoin demands that we protect pure information.
Which is incredibly hard for the human brain to prioritize.
It really is. And that friction between how human psychology operates and how cryptographic security actually functions in the real world, that's the silent engine behind some of the most catastrophic wealth losses we've seen over the last decade.
And if you're listening to this right now and you're actively trying to build sovereignty over your wealth and your time, you've probably hit this exact wall.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone hits it eventually.
That's the mission of our deep dive today. We are undertaking a really structural debate on self-custody.
And we're framing this specifically for adults who are intentionally building a resilient life, right?
Yes, across 4 core pillars: health, mind, timing, and market.
Which brings up the framework we're going to be using today, Ecoscopia and the sovereign method.
We should probably ground those terms before we go any further.
Yeah, definitely. Because they are crucial to how we'll evaluate everything today. The operating philosophy here is rigorous, but, pretty straightforward.
Let's unpack the 4 pillars for the listener.
Sure. So first you have to own your body, which is the health pillar.
Right.
Then you have to own your psychological focus and attention, which is the mind pillar.
Which is huge in this space, as we'll see later.
Exactly. Third, you have to own your optionality and your schedule, which is timing. And finally, you have to own your capital, which is the market pillar.
Okay, so health, mind, timing, and market.
Right. And every technical mechanism we discussed today is going to be read strictly through that lens to see if it actually serves you or if it secretly taxes one of those other pillars.
To do that, we've pulled together a really massive stack of source material for this deep dive.
We went pretty deep on this one.
We really did. We're going all the way back to Satoshi Nakamoto's foundational 2008 white paper.
The document that started it all.
Yep. We're also looking at the technical documentation on partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which is also known as BIP 174.
Which sounds incredibly dry, but the mechanics are fascinating.
Very true. We also have architectural teardowns of hardware devices like the Coldcard MK4 and their newer Q model.
The one with the little full keyboard on it.
Yeah, that's the one. But we are also grounding this in some very harsh realities. We've pulled recent bankruptcy examiner reports from custodial failures like FTX and Celsius.
Just absolute disasters.
Total disasters. And we're contrasting those corporate failures with investigative reporting out of France from early 2026, detailing incredibly violent physical attacks on people who hold their own keys.
Yeah, that reporting from Decrypt is incredibly sobering.
Mm.
Let's start by addressing the fracture in how this topic is even discussed publicly, though, because the discourse right now is completely broken.
It's so toxic.
It is. Self-custody is profoundly misunderstood. If you look around online or talk to people, you usually encounter the concept in one of two ways.
Yeah, there's no middle ground.
None. On one side, it's chanted as this militant, almost tribal slogan, not your keys, not your coins. It's treated as a moral imperative, like a purity test.
Like if you don't do it, you're a fake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, if you talk to a traditional financial advisor or a wealth manager, it is presented as a dire apocalyptic warning.
Right. They basically tell you you'll inevitably lose everything if you try to hold it yourself.
Which is incredibly unhelpful to someone actually trying to learn.
It's rarely discussed as what it actually is, which is a highly complex socio-technical system that demands a very specific, very unforgiving threat model.
Yes, a threat model is the key word there.
Treating custody like a bumper sticker is just absurd. It is the equivalent of going out, buying a state-of-the-art 10-ton bank vault, dragging it into your living room.
Okay, picture that.
Right. And then leaving the combination on a yellow sticky note stuck to the front door simply because nobody actually sat you down and explained the specific threat you were supposed to be defending against.
That polarization completely prevents any sort of rational analysis. I mean, the slogan, not your keys, not your coins, is technically accurate regarding the protocol's design.
Sure, at a software level.
Yeah, if you don't hold the keys, you don't actually own the asset. You just have an IOU from a custodian.
Hmm.
But as a piece of practical guidance for an individual, it is dangerously incomplete.
Because it implies that just holding the key solves the problem.
Exactly. It suggests that the mere act of taking possession of a private key automatically grants you security. And it absolutely does not.
Which brings us to the core structural tension of this entire debate. Self-custody does not magically remove risk from the equation.
No, the risk doesn't just evaporate.
The law of conservation of risk applies here perfectly. When you withdraw your assets from a centralized exchange or a bank, you are simply converting counterparty risk.
Meaning the risk that the institution fails or commits fraud or gets seized by a government.
Right. You're converting that institutional risk into two entirely different categories of risk. You are taking on competence risk, meaning your own ability to not make a stupid mistake, and physical risk, meaning the threat of someone breaking into your house.
And the debate we have to pull apart today is whether that conversion is genuinely an upgrade for the average person.
Is it actually an upgrade?
Right. Does converting counterparty risk into personal physical risk actually make you safer? Or does it just move the ultimate point of failure to a place where you have absolutely no one to call?
No password reset button.
Exactly. No customer service and no one to sue when the money is gone.
To get to the bottom of that, we really have to start by mechanically deconstructing what is actually happening under the hood.
Yes, let's look at the mechanics.
Let's assume no prior knowledge here because the foundational mechanics are exactly where the fatal errors occur for people.
It's where the whole system breaks down for the user.
Let's look at the hardware itself. You see devices like the Coldcard MK4 or the Q model we mentioned, and people refer to them as hardware wallets. But even that term is a total misnomer, isn't it?
It's a terrible name.
The device does not hold your Bitcoin.
Not at all. The Bitcoin never leaves the public ledger. The blockchain is just a globally distributed record of balances, constantly maintained by thousands of computers.
It's just a public spreadsheet.
Right. The hardware device you are holding in your hand strictly holds your private key. Think of the private key as the cryptographic proof of ownership.
Like a digital signature.
Exactly. It's the mathematical signature that allows you to authorize a movement of funds on that public ledger.
Let's break down how that private key is actually generated, because these devices are built like miniature fortresses.
The architecture of a device like the Coldcard is fascinating because it is designed around the fundamental assumption that the entire world, including its own components, might be hostile or compromised.
That's a very paranoid piece of plastic.
It is. It utilizes what's called a dual secure element model. It refuses to trust a single computer chip.
Why is that?
Well, instead, it uses two completely separate secure elements from two different manufacturers, specifically a microchip component and a Maxim component, alongside a main general-purpose microcontroller.
So if I'm understanding this, the reason for using two different chips from two entirely different manufacturers is to ensure that a supply chain vulnerability doesn't ruin you.
Precisely.
Like if someone intercepted the package in transit, or if there was a fundamental flaw baked into one manufacturer's silicon at the factory, it doesn't compromise the whole device.
That's the idea. They don't share the same bugs or vulnerabilities. For your private key to be compromised at the hardware level, an attacker would have to find a backdoor in all three chips simultaneously.
Which is exponentially more difficult.
Almost impossible. Furthermore, to generate a truly secure private key, you need perfect randomness, which cryptographers call entropy.
Right, it can't be predictable.
Exactly. The Coldcard generates this entropy by pulling random data from all three chips, reading the analog noise from the actual circuitry, and then pushing all of that chaos through a hashing algorithm called SHA-256 to remove any possible bias.
Hold on, let's make sure we unpack SHA-256 for a second so we aren't just throwing acronyms around.
Good idea.
Imagine a really heavy-duty meat grinder. You can put any size cut of meat into the top, a steak, a whole chicken, whatever, and it always pushes out a perfectly uniform, identical-looking sausage at the end.
Okay, I like where this is going.
But the crucial part is you can never take that sausage, put it back into the bottom of the machine, and somehow reconstruct the original chicken. That's what this mathematical algorithm does with your data.
It creates a one-way, mathematically irreversible output.
Right, you can't ungrind the math.
That is a perfect analogy. The output of that mathematical meat grinder is your raw private key. But humans are terrible at reading or memorizing raw binary code or long strings of hexadecimal characters.
Yeah, it looks like absolute gibberish.
So a standard was created called BIP39. This standard translates that complex cryptographic key into a human-readable format. It maps the data to a specific list of 2048 English words.
And this is where the seed phrase comes from.
Exactly. The result is your seed phrase, usually 12 or 24 words like apple, river, zebra, and so on.
And this right here is where we hit what I call the inversion. This is a massive structural flaw in human psychology that causes so much pain in this space.
The inversion of value.
That piece of paper with those 12 or 24 words written on it, that is the actual asset. If I have those words, I can throw that heavily armored, dual secure element Coldcard straight into the ocean.
You really could.
I can wait 10 years, buy a completely different device from a completely different vendor, type those 24 words in, and my wealth is completely intact. The physical device is entirely disposable.
It is merely a temporary vessel for the information. The paper holds the wealth. The circuitry is irrelevant.
Oh, wait, look at how people actually behave in the real world. They invert this entirely.
They absolutely do.
Because a hardware wallet is a piece of physical technology that looks cool, it has a glowing screen, and it costs maybe $200, people treat it like it's a fighter jet.
They buy special little padded cases for it.
Right. They put the plastic device in a heavy steel floor safe. They handle it with kid gloves. And then they write the 24 words on a piece of flimsy notebook paper and shove it in a desk drawer next to their spare AA batteries and old tax returns.
It's horrifying.
Why do we do this? It is a total failure of our biological software to properly value pure information over a physical object.
It happens because we lack the intuitive framework to evaluate digital scarcity. For our entire evolutionary history, value has always been tied to mass.
Like the gold bar.
Exactly. Gold is heavy. Real estate is massive. To our primitive brains, the expensive electronic gadget with the blinking lights feels like the valuable thing, while a piece of paper feels like a receipt.
That cognitive trap is so dangerous.
And it's compounded by the intense operational security measures these devices employ, which makes the hardware feel even more precious. Take the concept of the air gap, for instance.
Let's talk about the air gap.
A strict self-custody operator using a Coldcard will never, under any circumstances, plug that device into a computer that is connected to the internet.
No USB cables, no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi. It is completely isolated.
They maintain a strict physical air gap. So how do you actually send a transaction if the device can't talk to the network?
Yeah, how does the math get out?
They use a standard called BIP 174, which stands for Partially Signed Bitcoin Transaction, or PSBT.
Let's ground this in a real-world equivalent. Think of a PSBT like a blank check that you fit out the amount and the recipient's name for, but you haven't signed the bottom yet.
That's exactly what it is.
You can safely carry that unsigned check through a dangerous neighborhood. You can hand it to a stranger because without your physical signature on the bottom line, it's just a worthless piece of paper. The funds cannot move.
Let's walk through the actual physical steps a user takes to do this, because it highlights the operational reality. You sit at your everyday internet-connected laptop.
Okay, I'm at my laptop.
You open a wallet interface software, and you create the skeleton of a transaction, the unsigned check. You tell the software, I want to send 1 Bitcoin to this specific address.
Got it.
The software generates that PSBT file. You then save that file onto a tiny standard microSD card. You physically eject the card from your laptop.
The little card shuffle.
The shuffle, exactly. You walk it over to your Coldcard, which is powered by a wall outlet or a 9-volt battery, so it never touches a data cable.
Yep.
You insert the SD card. You review the transaction details on the tiny screen to make sure your computer hasn't been hacked to swap the address.
Which is a real threat, malware swapping addresses on your clipboard.
Very real. And then you press a button to mathematically sign it with your private key. The Coldcard writes a new, fully signed PSBT file back to the microSD card.
Okay, so now the check is signed.
Right. You pop it out, walk it back to your laptop, plug it in, and broadcast the signed transaction to the global network. The private key never, ever touches an internet-connected device.
Okay, I have to attack this assumption right now because we need to view this through the lens of our threat model.
Go for it.
Is this air gap actually meaningful security for a normal person, or is it just ritual comfort? Is it security theater?
That's a heavy accusation.
But look at it practically. Maintaining a strict air gap and shuffling tiny microSD cards back and forth across your living room hardens you against an elite, remote, nation-state level hacker trying to extract keys via a compromised USB port.
True.
It is incredible defense against a digital attacker that 99.9% of the population will never, ever face. But it does absolutely nothing zero to protect against the actual threats in their physical environment.
The physical vector is completely different.
Right. It feels like installing a titanium vault door to stop a cyber attack while completely ignoring the guy with a crowbar watching you through the living room window.
It is a highly specific mitigation. You are completely right that it only closes the digital vector and it leaves the physical vector wide open.
Completely open.
But to understand why people are willing to endure that level of operational friction, the SD cards, the batteries, the complex steps, we have to look at the absolute strongest case for sovereign key control.
We need to Steelman it.
We have to Steelman the argument for doing this in the first place rather than just pointing out its flaws. And to do that properly, we need to go back to Satoshi Nakamoto's original 2008 white paper.
The genesis document of the entire system.
Yes, if you read the opening paragraphs of that white paper, Nakamoto explicitly diagnosed the inherent structural weaknesses of the traditional trust-based model of commerce.
Right, the reliance on banks.
In a system that relies on centralized financial institutions, like banks, credit card companies, or payment processors transactions, are inherently reversible.
Which seems like a feature to most people.
It does, but because they are reversible, institutions are forced to mediate disputes. Mediation carries a heavy operational overhead cost, which increases transaction fees and completely cuts off the economic viability of small, casual, cross-border transactions.
It makes microtransactions impossible.
Exactly. Furthermore, because transactions can be reversed, merchants must constantly be wary of their customers, demanding excessive amounts of personal data to prevent fraud. The traditional trust model is expensive, invasive, and ultimately fragile.
So the goal was to create an electronic payment system based entirely on cryptographic proof instead of institutional trust.
By holding your own keys in cold storage, by maintaining that exact air gap you were just criticizing, you completely sever your reliance on third parties.
Which is a powerful concept.
It's massive. If your keys are offline in your physical possession, no exchange compliance department can arbitrarily freeze your funds because an algorithm flagged a transaction.
No one can turn off your account.
Right. No CEO can take your deposited assets and secretly lend them out to a highly leveraged, risky hedge fund, which, as we will discuss shortly, is exactly what happened in the FTX collapse.
Oh, we're definitely getting to FTX.
And if a centralized entity goes bankrupt, they cannot drag your life savings down into years of legal purgatory. When you hold the keys, you achieve pure, peer-to-peer money creation and ownership.
True financial sovereignty.
Your wealth exists entirely outside the traditional financial architecture. Nobody can debase it, nobody can seize it, and nobody can deny you access to it.
I hear that. That is the philosophical peak of the argument. It sounds incredibly empowering. But let's test the mechanical reality of that sovereignty.
Okay, let's test it.
If I go through all this trouble, if I hold my own keys on an air-gapped Coldcard, but I still use a commercial wallet interface on my laptop to broadcast that PSBT and to check my daily balance,
I see where you're going.
I am still relying on that company's node, their servers, to tell me what the public ledger says. I'm asking them how much money I have.
Which introduces another massive tension in the sovereignty argument, and that is the tension of verification.
Right. True self-custody, according to the absolute strictest interpretation of the ethos, requires you to run your own Bitcoin node.
Yes, verifying the ledger yourself.
You have to buy a dedicated hard drive, download the entire history of the blockchain, hundreds of gigabytes of data, and verify every single transaction yourself since 2009.
It's a heavy lift for a normal person.
It's a huge lift. If you hold your own keys, but you rely on a third party's node to tell you your balance or to verify that the money you just received is actually real, is that actually self-custody?
You're trusting their view of the network.
Or is it just a much more elaborate, labor-intensive form of trust? You're still asking a third party for the truth of your financial reality.
The protocol is designed around the maxim, don't trust, verify. Nakamoto's paper does discuss a concept called simplified payment verification, or SPV.
What does that do?
Well, it theoretically allows users to verify payments without running a full, heavy network node by just keeping a copy of the block headers. However, you're hitting on a core truth here.
Which is?
For absolute trustless sovereignty, running a full node is the only way to be completely decoupled from third-party validation. It is the only way to know, for a mathematically proven fact, that the consensus rules of the network have not been altered without your consent.
Right, and that the Bitcoin you received isn't counterfeit.
But yes, it adds another layer of technical infrastructure that the user must maintain.
Which brings me to the counterargument. I want to spend some time building the strongest structural case against solo self-custody.
That's good.
Because we are talking about asking normal people to become their own bank vault, their own IT administrator, and their own armed security detail for the rest of their natural lives.
It is a massive responsibility.
And when you look at the reality of operational failure, it is staggering. The on-chain data suggests that roughly 20% of all Bitcoin ever mined is simply lost forever.
20%. That represents millions of individual coins.
It's hard to even fathom.
In terms of purchasing power, we are talking about billions and billions of dollars of wealth that is permanently inaccessible.
And crucially, this is the point everyone misses. Those losses are almost never due to the Bitcoin protocol being hacked or the cryptography being fundamentally broken by a supercomputer.
No, the math holds up perfectly.
The math is fine. They are lost due to mundane human error. It's lost keys, it's water-damaged paper backups in a flooded basement, it's forgotten passwords.
It's people accidentally throwing away old hard drives at the town dump.
Exactly, or people tragically dying without leaving clear, actionable instructions for their spouses. We are actively encouraging people to convert a risk we culturally understand, a bank failing or freezing an account, into a risk we are notoriously terrible at managing.
Which is our own continuous flawless competence over a span of decades.
Exactly. Nobody is flawless for 30 years straight.
The hardware manufacturers are acutely aware of this competence risk, which is why devices like the Coldcard have evolved to include highly complex layered defense mechanisms.
Like what?
They are trying to solve physical problems with software. For example, to defend against the threat of physical coercion, someone demanding your PIN, they offer features like trick pins.
Okay, I have thoughts on this, but explain it first.
You can set up a secondary duress pin that, when entered into the device, unlocks a completely fake wallet containing a small, decoy amount of funds.
So you hand them the decoy money and hope they leave.
Right, while keeping your main vault entirely hidden. Or you can take it a step further and set a brickman pin.
A brick me pin?
Yeah. If you are under physical threat, you enter this specific numerical sequence, and the device functionally self-destructs. It intentionally wipes the secure elements, overwrites the data, and destroys all cryptographic secrets held within it, rendering the device a useless piece of plastic.
Okay, stop. I have to argue fiercely against these specific features for the average person.
I figured you would.
Look at the psychology of a brick me pin. Are these features genuine protection against a violent attacker in your home? Or are they just a highly sophisticated mechanism for a user to permanently lose everything to their own faulty memory?
It's a double-edged sword.
Imagine it's 3 years from now. You're stressed about work, you haven't slept well, you haven't moved your funds or used the device in months.
You're just trying to make a quick transaction.
Right. You sit down and you misremember which complex string of digits is your main PIN and which one triggers a complete irreversible device wipe.
Oh, man.
You could literally vaporize your own family's net worth because of a brain fog memory lapse on a Tuesday morning. You're telling me I can fat finger my PIN code before my morning coffee and nuke everything? That's insane.
The complexity certainly introduces severe fragility. If your operational discipline is not absolute, the tools designed to protect you will be the exact tools that destroy you.
Exactly. The single point of failure is terrifying.
This tension, the single point of failure of a single seed phrase, and the danger of overly complex PINs is exactly why the industry has shifted heavily toward multi-signature custody.
Which people just call multi-sig.
Right, multi-sig is the structural solution.
I keep hearing about multi-sig as the ultimate bulletproof vest for all of this. It's pitched as the grown-up way to hold wealth. But mechanically, how does that actually solve the problem of me just losing my 24 words or blowing up my device with a trick pin on?
In a standard single signature setup, one private key controls the assets. If that one key is lost or if that one seed phrase is destroyed, the assets are gone.
Complete loss.
It's a terrifying single point of failure. In a multi-sig setup, the ownership of the funds is governed by a smart contract on the blockchain that requires a specific quorum of keys to authorize any transaction.
A quorum, meaning more than one.
Right. The most common architecture for individuals is a 2 of 3 quorum. You generate 3 entirely separate private keys. To move the funds, any 2 of those 3 keys must sign the PSBT.
And we're seeing services like Casa or Unchained offering what they call collaborative custody based on this exact model.
Let's walk through the exact user experience of a collaborative 2 of 3 model to see how it shifts the risk. In this setup, you, the user, might hold 2 of the keys.
Okay.
You keep one key on a Coldcard inside a heavy safe at your house. You generate the second key on a completely different brand of hardware wallet. Maybe a Trezor or a Foundation Passport.
Diversifying the hardware.
Exactly. And you store that one inside a safety deposit box at a local bank branch. The service provider, like Unchained, holds the third key on their institutional servers.
So they have one, I have 2.
Right. If you want to send money normally, you sign with your home device, then you drive to the bank, sign with the second device, and the money moves. Unchained is not involved.
Because I already have the 2 keys needed for the 2 of 3 quorum.
Exactly. However, if your house burns down and your Coldcard is destroyed, you haven't lost your wealth.
Because I still have the bank key.
Yes. You simply go to the bank, retrieve your remaining key, and you ask the provider to use their third key alongside yours to sweep the funds into a newly established, secure setup.
That's incredibly elegant.
It fundamentally eliminates the single point of failure. A thief would need to find, compromise, and physically extract keys from 2 geographically separated physical locations to steal your wealth.
It sounds perfect in theory. It sounds like you've solved the puzzle. But here is the multi-sig illusion.
Let's hear it.
Yes, you have successfully removed one single point of failure, the devastating loss of a single piece of paper. But in doing so, look what you just built. You have installed several new compounding points of failure.
You've added a lot of friction.
Immense friction. You have introduced immense coordination complexity into your life. You now have to purchase and manage multiple hardware devices from different manufacturers.
You have to keep track of multiple PINs.
You have to ensure the firmware is safely updated across all of them without introducing malware. You have to safely store multiple seed phrases in multiple locations. And you introduce the risk of losing quorum.
Explain how a user loses quorum.
Okay, what if you lose one key in a house fire and you think, it's fine, I have the bank key and the Unchained key?
Right, you're not panicking.
But what if the service provider goes out of business, gets hacked, or has their servers seized by regulators on the exact same month? You now only have one key.
Which isn't enough to move the funds.
You cannot move the funds. The money is frozen forever. Picture the user journey here. You are sitting in your living room trying to rebalance your portfolio or make a time-sensitive transaction.
Okay.
With a 2 of 3 multi-sig, you approve it on your laptop, but the money doesn't move. You then have to walk down to your basement safe, pull out a device, plug in the SD card, sign it, bring it back up.
That's just the first signature.
Then you literally have to get in your car, drive across town during banking hours, Show your ID to the teller, go into the vault, pull out the second device, sign it again. The administrative burden is massive.
It's practically a part-time job at that point.
Exactly. Where is the crossover point where the complexity of managing a distributed multi-sig setup becomes a larger statistical risk to your wealth than simply guarding a single key very, very well?
To properly evaluate that crossover point, we really need to ground this theoretical debate in concrete, dated examples of failure on both ends of the custody spectrum.
I need to open the failure file.
Yes. Let's look at the absolute worst-case scenario of delegation first. The bankruptcy documents from FTX and Celsius paint a stark, terrifying picture of what happens when custodial risk materializes.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario of giving someone else your keys.
When you delegate custody to a centralized exchange, you might see a number on a screen that says you own 1 Bitcoin. But behind the scenes, your assets are typically commingled in their vast infrastructure.
They're all mixed together.
Exactly. You don't have a dedicated vault, you are just a line item in their database. The bankruptcy examiner reports from FTX highlight how unbelievably chaotic and negligent this can be.
It was amateur hour.
Billions of dollars of customer assets were left sitting in hot wallets.
For the listener, a hot wallet is a storage environment where the private keys are held on servers continuously connected to the internet.
Exactly. Hot wallets are inherently vulnerable to remote exploitation, malware, and hacking because the keys are online, ready to sign transactions at a millisecond's notice to facilitate trading.
They prioritized speed over security.
They absolutely did. Furthermore, the Celsius Bankruptcy Examiner report detailed how internal risk management was completely bypassed.
What were they doing with the funds?
The executives took retail client assets, the coins people thought were just sitting safely in an account, and utilized them to generate yield in highly risky, experimental, decentralized finance protocols.
You're making leverage bets with depositors' money.
And when the market crashed and those bets turned sour, the depositors realized the horrific legal reality. They didn't own any Bitcoin.
They were just creditors.
They were simply unsecured creditors in a massive multi-year bankruptcy proceeding fighting over pennies on the dollar. The counterparty risk was absolute, and the loss was nearly total.
So that is the nightmare scenario of trusting a third party. They take your money, they gamble it, they lose it, and you get a legal notice in the mail.
A very expensive lesson.
But we have to look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Let's look at the nightmare scenario of strict self-custody, specifically focusing on coercion risk.
The physical element.
Because this isn't just about losing a piece of paper in a fire or forgetting a PN code. It's about what happens when human malice enters your personal physical space. Let's look at the investigative reporting from Decrypt from January 2026, detailing the situation out of France.
We saw a deeply troubling surge in violent physical attacks, specifically targeting crypto holders.
Yes, and the details are harrowing. In the town of Verneuil-sur-Seine, 3 armed assailants broke into a family home in the middle of the night.
They knew exactly who they were looking for.
They specifically targeted a crypto investment executive. They didn't just ask for a password. They beat both the parents, they bound the couple and their 2 young children with cable ties, and attempted to force them, under threat of death, to hand over their assets.
Just horrific.
Just one day prior to that incident, a 43-year-old man was violently kidnapped from his home in Saint-Léger-sous-Cholet during the early morning hours. He was bound, severely beaten, and eventually dumped out of a vehicle 50 kilometers away in a town called Basse-Goulaine.
And this wasn't random, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
What's chilling is that investigators confirmed his family had faced multiple attempted break-ins over the holidays before the actual kidnapping occurred. They were being stalked.
This is the brutal reality of what the cryptocurrency community somewhat glibly refers to as the $5 wrench attack.
Which is such an insensitive term for actual torture.
It really is. You can spend months engineering the most sophisticated cryptographic security setup on Earth. You can use air-gapped, dual secure element hardware wallets.
You can have 2 of 3 multi-sig across different banks.
Right. But all of that digital armor is completely circumvented by the application of crude physical violence against you or the people you love. The cryptography is unbreakable, but the human bones holding the keys are very fragile.
And the cybercrime consultants who were analyzing these specific French attacks pointed out something critical that shifts the entire risk model.
What do they find?
These crimes are heavily underreported. When someone's house is broken into and cash is stolen, they call the police.
Naturally.
But when a crypto holder is tortured for their seed phrase, Victims are forced to weigh a terrible calculus. They have to weigh the extremely low probability of the police actually recovering stolen digital funds routed through mixers against the very high risk of physical danger if the criminals return.
Plus the reputational damage and the total exposure of their hidden wealth to the local authorities.
Exactly. The very nature of a bearer asset effectively gags the victim from seeking justice.
Which raises a crucial mechanical question. How do the criminals know who to target in the first place? The security of the blockchain is public. Everyone can see the balances of specific addresses, but the identities attached to those addresses are pseudo-anonymous.
Right. There are no names on the ledger.
So how do they find the house?
And that brings us to the most frustrating vulnerability of all: supply chain and physical exposure. Let's look at the 2020 Ledger data leak.
Ah, yes, the Ledger leak.
Ledger is one of the largest hardware wallet manufacturers in the world. They suffered a catastrophic data breach. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a breach of their hardware. The devices in the field remained perfectly secure. The cryptography didn't fail.
Right, it wasn't a hack of the Bitcoin protocol.
What failed was their e-commerce database. The names, personal email addresses, physical home addresses, and phone numbers of nearly 300,000 customers were stolen and eventually dumped onto the dark web for anyone to download.
The implications of that leak, when viewed structurally, are profound.
It is the ultimate structural lesson. Purchasing a specialized hardware wallet to secure your digital sovereignty creates a permanent, immutable physical record on a shipping ledger somewhere that you hold Bitcoin.
You're putting yourself on a list.
That data sits on Shopify servers, it sits in a postal service database, it sits in an email marketing list. You cannot separate the digital realm from the physical realm.
Your digital security decisions invariably produce physical world exposure.
The moment you enter your credit card and order a cold storage device to your home address, you have effectively placed a giant neon flag on your roof for any organized crime syndicate capable of buying a hacked database.
People from that Ledger leak received incredibly threatening text messages.
They received texts threatening to murder their families if they didn't send funds. It was psychological warfare.
This perfectly illustrates how the external environment fundamentally alters the definition and the safety of custody. Geography dictates risk.
Explain that connection.
Well, custody is not purely a technical or cryptographic problem. It is heavily determined by the legal and regulatory environment in which your physical body resides.
Explain how the rules shift based on where you are standing on the map.
Let's contrast Europe with parts of Latin America. Under the European Union's markets in crypto assets regulation, known as MiCA, the regulatory environment is becoming highly stringent and surveilled.
Very tight controls.
Extremely tight. Under these frameworks, self-hosted wallets, which is the regulatory term for self-custody, face heavy scrutiny. There are strict reporting requirements for transactions moving between centralized exchanges and self-hosted wallets.
They want to know exactly who owns what.
The underlying regulatory baseline assumes that unhosted wealth is an inherent compliance risk, potentially tied to money laundering, that must be tracked, categorized, and de-anonymized.
And if you look outside of Europe,
Conversely, if you look at jurisdictions like Brazil or Paraguay, the regulatory footprint regarding self-custody is entirely different. It is often much more permissive or completely undefined, meaning the state doesn't treat your private wallet as suspicious by default.
so where you stand geographically fundamentally changes what self-custody actually costs you in terms of risk.
Yes, your physical location changes your threat model entirely.
Let's connect this back to those home invasions in France. If a violent rent attack happens in a jurisdiction where the victim fears the tax authorities, regulatory scrutiny, or civil asset forfeiture almost as much as they fear the criminals,
The victim is completely trapped.
the self-custody model effectively isolates them. They cannot rely on the state apparatus for protection or recovery without exposing themselves to severe audits or having their remaining assets tracked and flagged.
In that environment, the sovereignty of self-custody actually strips you of the protection of civil society.
It forces the individual to absorb all of the defensive costs, physical security, legal defense, operational secrecy, that the state or a regulated financial institution normally provides as part of the social contract.
Which brings us to the moment where we have to evaluate this entire complex structure of self-custody through the lens we established at the beginning, the sovereign method.
Right, back to the 4 pillars: health, mind, timing, and market.
If we evaluate strict solo self-custody through this framework, it decisively, undeniably strengthens the market pillar. By holding your own keys offline, your capital is immune to counterparty failure.
No one can stop you from transacting.
It cannot be lent out to hedge funds, it cannot be rehypothecated, it cannot be frozen by an overzealous compliance algorithm, and it cannot be debased. You have absolute sovereign peer-to-peer ownership.
I concede that the market pillar is strengthened. But the argument I will make, the reality most people refuse to talk about, is that strengthening the market pillar exacts a massive, continuous, and often unacknowledged tax on the mind pillar.
The psychological burden.
Yes. Self-custody transfers a permanent, low-grade operational anxiety directly onto the holder. Every single time you have to update the firmware on your device, every time you move the micro SD card to sign a PSBT, there is a physiological spike in stress.
You're holding your breath, waiting for the transaction to clear.
You double-check, triple-check the addresses. You worry about a clipboard hijacking malware on your laptop. This anxiety compounds exponentially during moments of market volatility, during international travel, and during periods of personal stress. You are never truly at rest.
It demands an exceptional level of psychological regulation and focus.
And it demands perfect regulation of the timing pillar. Because key operations executed under emotional pressure, trying to move assets quickly during a 30% market crash, or hastily trying to migrate a seed phrase to a new hiding spot because you saw someone suspicious on your street, those are exactly the moments when human beings make irreversible errors.
That's when you enter the wrong PIN.
They send funds to the wrong derivation path, they misplace a backup paper, they enter the trick PY by mistake. The question I have is this. Can an unregulated human nervous system actually carry the burden of sovereign custody over a timeline of decades?
That's the real test.
I would argue that for the vast majority of the population, the honest answer is no.
And that operational fragility, the reliance on a single human mind staying sharp and focused, leads us to the ultimate failure condition of self-custody, the failure of inheritance.
This is the darkest reality of the entire movement.
Most solo self-custody plans, by their very architectural design, die with the holder. If you architect a security setup that is perfectly resistant to theft, if you memorize complex passphrases, if you hide your stamped metal seed words perfectly inside the walls of your house.
If you tell absolutely no one how the system works in order to protect your family from extortion.
Exactly. What happens if you suffer a massive heart attack or you are in a fatal car accident tomorrow?
The assets are functionally vaporized. The man who did everything perfectly, who read all the manuals, maintained absolute operational security to protect his family's generational wealth, inadvertently impoverishes them upon his sudden death.
It's tragic irony.
Think about the widow trying to navigate the probate process. The cryptography doesn't care that you died. The blockchain doesn't recognize a death certificate, a judge's order, or a last will and testament.
The math is indifferent to human tragedy.
Without the private keys, without the exact derivation paths and passphrases, the decentralized ledger just sees dormant data. The wealth sits there on the public ledger, visible to the grieving family, but permanently untouchable.
Collaborative custody models, like the multi-sig services we discussed earlier, are actively attempting to solve this exact dilemma by offering inheritance protocols.
How does that work in practice?
In those setups, the service provider can gently guide designated heirs through a legal and cryptographic recovery process over time, using the company's key alongside a key recovered from an estate lawyer.
That makes a lot of sense.
But for strict solo self-custody, the inheritance problem requires a deeply complex trade-off between operational secrecy while you are alive to prevent theft and accessibility for your heirs when you are gone.
So we step back. After looking at the hardware, the failures, the violence, and the psychology, the debate remains completely unresolved.
It really is a personal calculus.
If you are an adult attempting to build sovereignty, you have to look unblinkingly at the realities of both sides. You have to decide alone whether converting the very real risk of custodial collapse, the FTX scenario, into the equally real risks of physical violence, your own operational error, and catastrophic inheritance failure is a trade you are structurally prepared to make.
There is no perfect risk-free solution in this space. There is only a selection of trade-offs, and you have to choose which vulnerabilities you're willing to manage.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. A thread to pull on your own time. Consider the concept of cryptographic decay.
This is a really important concept to grasp.
Let us assume you successfully secure your seed phrase today. You do everything right. You engrave those Tom-4 words into marine-grade titanium. You bury it safely.
You're perfectly secure today.
What happens in 20 or 30 years? The hardware ecosystem will have entirely shifted. The specific derivation paths, the wallet software, and the BIP39 standard itself might be considered obsolete or superseded by entirely new, quantum-resistant cryptographic norms.
The technology will absolutely not remain static.
The technical debt of migrating your sovereign wealth across decades falls entirely on you. It falls on an aging mind.
You have to keep up with the upgrades.
Are you genuinely prepared to act as your own IT security administrator, migrating cryptographic secrets to new, unfamiliar hardware architectures for the rest of your natural life?
It's a lifelong commitment.
It goes right back to our opening thought. It's not like buying a heavy bar of gold and putting it in a drawer for 30 years, knowing it will be exactly the same when you open it.
Gold doesn't need firmware updates.
Exactly. If you lose the receipt to this digital vault, or if the language of the receipt is forgotten by the world's software, the asset is gone. You don't just own the wealth, you are forced to actively maintain the architecture of its existence every single day.
That's the dive. Sit with it before you act on it. Ecoscopia.net. Timing, cycles, and the work of staying sovereign. Subscribe and send the topic you want taken apart. Blood, coin, forge. Echoes of Insight.